I have waited so long for this day. I've always considered video games and hip-hop to be distant relatives of the sort. Both were created, popular, controversial, mainstream, and commercialized in generally the same time frame, and not like this is super important, but they're both two of my favorite things ever. These are two mediums that have had such a huge impact on my life and have shaped me in ways that are good. I think. However, I really want to emphasize the fact that both of these are relatively newer forms of art that, for the most part, you're either on board with or not. There's things about both of them that immediately turn a lot of people away, and it's not that often that the artists are going to compromise on the craft in order to appeal to those people. This explains how both the gaming industry and the rap scene were in such hot water for a time, but it also shows the length that some people will go to in order to try and damage and cause harm to their reputation. To some of you, that may be a very deep and upsetting realization, but to others, all this negativity might remind you of a certain someone. Yes, that was exactly who I was thinking. Sonic the Hedgehog is what some would regard as a legendary video game series, and while there are a lot of reasons as to why, one of the most universally regarded is how godly its music is. This is a sentiment that I don't think I've heard anyone disagree with, but it's important to note that much of the reason for its acclaim is because of how much diversity is in its music library. It's hard to name a genre of music that the series hasn't touched, and while it's safe to say that rock will probably always be its most popular genre, I would argue that its most long-running inspiration was hip-hop. Now, if I didn't already make this clear, I am a gigantic nerd, and as such, I want to spend some time analyzing and picking apart how this series utilizes hip-hop. I primarily want to talk about the two aspects of hip-hop that the series tends to draw the most inspiration from: the actual rapping and the uses of sampling. The main reason for this is because, if I'm being honest, I am the most interested in seeing how this series translates those two elements. Before we start though, I really need to emphasize just how long I have waited to actually make a video like this. Again, video games and hip-hop are my bread and butter, and I love both more than anybody will ever be able to comprehend. But as shocking as this might sound, one of the reasons for why it took so long was because I always had a hard time figuring out how I was going to talk about. In theory, this should not be a hard thing to accomplish, but when talking about two things that half the audience probably doesn't even care about, I always caught myself trying to brainstorm how to make a segment like this interesting, while also not completely going off the deep end with my rap knowledge. I feel like it'd be better if I talked about each of them semi-chronologically, and see which subsection of rap it's taking inspiration from. Because believe it or not, rap does have quite a few different subgenres. Like every music genre ever. The Sonic Adventure duology were the first mainline games in the series to feature actual vocal performances, with a select few music genres being represented. The way hip-hop was represented was mainly portrayed through the very infamous Knuckles raps. Sonic Adventure 1 only got 1, while Sonic Adventure 2 had 5. And it seems to me like all of these songs were attempting to emulate the sound of the rap industry from that era, specifically the sound of more East Coast hip-hop. It definitely comes off the strongest on Adventure 1's version of Unknown from ME, especially with that incredibly well done R&B styled chorus, which was a very popular trend in most rap records during the mid to late 90s. Adventure 2's Knuckles raps seem to be taking more inspiration from the underground rap scene, at least in terms of their more industrial and sample heavy sound. I mean, it does help that they got an actual underground rapper to provide the vocals for these songs, and even though the song's quality, and the person's quality for that matter, aren't super high, at least these two, I think we can all agree, are at the very least good. Yes? Okay. Moving on, I want to talk about the two vocal tracks that attempt to fuse rap with the series' flagship music genre, His World and Find Your Flame from Sonic 06 and Sonic Frontiers respectively. I decided to group these two together because they are both songs that I consider to fall under the rock-rap category. God, I wish there was a better term for this. This subgenre is what it sounds like. It takes rock, it takes rap, and it fuses them together. These kind of songs generally follow the same basic template, with the verses being composed of raps and the chorus being primarily sung. And of the two, His World follows this formula nearly to a T. However, Find Your Flame, while it still does follow the same basic outline, you can tell that its primary inspiration was with another subgenre called nu metal, which is literally almost the exact same thing, now with 25% more Granted, it's not a huge difference or anything, but it's still something that I feel is worth mentioning, because really, aside from that, all the things that made His World so good can pretty much be copy-pasted here. In terms of the mainline series, these are surprisingly the only 4 games that feature any kind of rapping, which means we must now look towards external media to get our rap fix. And it just so happens that of all the various times that Sonic has infested other mediums, the only times that Sonic has crossed paths with any sort of hip-hop affiliation was with his transition to the big screen. Every single person watching this video has seen all 3 Sonic movies at this point. However, for the 2 people who haven't, both the first and second movies ended off with actual rap records from actual legitimate rap artists. And while you can make an argument that these songs could fit under a multitude of different subgenres, I think it's a fair assessment to say that both songs fall under some variation of the trap category. Trap records have a very simplistic and bass-heavy production, as well as making use of auto-tune in order to emphasize the melodic nature of the vocals. Speed Me Up is the song that comes off the most heavily with this. However, Stars in the Sky is a song that tends to lead harder towards alternative rap, given how there are a lot more funk and soul elements present. Now, regardless if you think that these are actual Sonic songs or not, this would be the first time in the franchise's existence where it actually collabed with fairly massive rappers, and that's huge. In many ways, it is a bit of a full circle moment because of how much inspiration hip-hop has had on this series. All of the rap records that I've mentioned were released at a time where each of these subgenres were at their peak popularity, which shows that the musicians at Sonic Team were actually paying attention and treated all of them with that same level of admiration and reverence. And to see the series finally collab with all these big name rappers at the end of all of that, it honestly makes me a tad bit emotional. As a massive fan of both, it's just such a beautiful thing to witness. However, as I've previously mentioned, the art of rapping is only one piece of this genre's influence, and if anything, it's actually the harder piece to argue for, because I genuinely don't think that showcasing how hip-hop has influenced Sonic music could be easier than showcasing just how effectively it utilizes the art of sampled music in video games is not a new or groundbreaking concept. Most of your favorite games use some kind of sample in their soundtracks, largely because games have been using sample-based music for over 30 years at this point. However, I don't know what it is about Sonic, but there's just something about how these games do sampling that is so hip-hop centric. Sonic CD was the first mainline game in the series to use sampling in the way that's most commonly used today. Most, if not all of the tracks on here feature samples from various different outlets. And again, I know I'm not very good at explaining it, but there's just something about how it integrates these samples into the tracks themselves that feels so respectful to hip-hop culture. Part of it could be how much it utilizes samples from the 60s and 70s, as well as its reliance on vocal sampling, both of which were sources that a lot of hip-hop producers were pulling from, especially during this time. However, I think the underlying reason has a lot to do with how scratchy and industrial the overall sound of these tracks are. I'm sure this style of sampling has definitely extended outside of the hip-hop sphere, but this will always be the element that will closely associate with this genre of music. And CD is one of the strongest games in the series in this regard. But even still, quite a few Sonic games managed to capture that same vibe, with the Adventure series once again being one of the more primary examples. The themes for White Jungle and the second half of Red Mountain both have all of these same exact elements fully intact. They are loud, bombastic, aggressive, and for Red Mountain especially, just like with the Knuckles raps, is very unapologetic in terms of the style of music that is taking inspiration from, even going on to more recent titles. Never mind, Sonic Mania's rendition of Metallic Madness is yet another track that embraces this energy. I know this kinda goes without saying, as this is effectively a remix of a track on Sonic CD, but Mania does do a few key things differently. Both acts incorporate vocal samples a lot more, and the overall vibe is a lot more upbeat and bouncy. That's also not to mention the god tier freestyle rap happening in the background. And no, I don't understand what they're saying, but I do know that it just further adds to the fun-loving energy of this track. Nearly every part of this song is fully embracing and letting that hip-hop inspiration come through in the most purest and most authentic way possible. And I would not be able to say that without how abundant and well integrated the vocal samples are. Now, in terms of sampling, there are two more games that I would like to talk about, and I'm not gonna be around the bush. It is because of them that this video exists. Each of them should be picked apart and studied for how genetically accurate they are to hip-hop and hip-hop culture, because as far as I'm concerned, only a select few games in this industry manage to capture the essence of hip-hop on the same level as the Sonic Rush duology. Right from the word go, these games blast you in the face with all different sorts of music samples, vocal samples, loud noises, industrial banging. Like, it's so much to take in. It could not be more transparent about the type of music that's taking inspiration from. And while that's the thing that's allowed me to fall in love with it almost instantly, I feel like it'd be a bit of a disservice if we didn't look under the hood a little bit. In a similar fashion to Sonic CD, vocal samples are at the forefront of nearly all the tracks in these games. However, in terms of how they're put together, that right there is the thing that makes the hip-hop element shine as bright as it does. All of the tracks that we've looked at thus far generally followed a similar formula to how most rap records use sampling. They would take a part of a song and have those few seconds be the skeleton in which the rest of the song would be built from. This is actually the very thing that Rush Adventure utilizes, and it reaps all the benefits that come with that. However, the fundamental thing that makes both of these games different is how much it increases the speed and the pitch of these vocals in order to create a loop that is not only unrecognizable, but is also so much more fast-paced and upbeat, and Sonic-like. It takes that loud industrial sound of hip-hop and uses it to make music that precisely encapsulates the energy of a Sonic game. And the amount of genius that is required to make that happen is insane. It proves that the series doesn't have to lean exclusively on rock or EDM in order to capture that energy. And the fact that these are the only two games in the series to even attempt doing something like this is a real shame. But my friend, we are only just getting started. Sonic Rush, the first one, the original 2005 DS game, took this concept to a place that I didn't even know was possible. On the surface, the game's music follows the same tried and true formula that Rush Adventure, CD, and all the other games have adopted. But digging a little bit deeper into it, you will realize just how many moving parts each of these songs have. Hideki Naganuma, this artifact of a man, not only used one sample as the base, but he also takes another sample from a completely different song with its own chord progression and BPM and everything, and just makes it work with the rest of the track. Like, I can't even pick apart and analyze how he made it work, because he just does. And he does this for nearly every song in the game. He pulls from so many different songs and uses so many different voice samples that it's debatable if there's even a skeleton anymore. And the fact that everything still fits together in a cohesive way that sounds good, like, I just can't comprehend it. There's this YouTube channel called Tower Equip, and they made a video compiling every single sample that was used to make Sonic Rush's soundtrack, and you have that video to thank for this video being made. The Rush games were already in my top 5 favorite soundtracks in this entire series, but this video has made me realize just how insane Naganuma was while producing it. Like, it just hurts my head thinking about this because it's just so brain-breaking. Like, I can't describe it in any other way than that. The link to Tower Equip's video, as well as all the videos and resources that I used to research this topic, will be in the description below, because I genuinely find picking apart this stuff to be so addictive. Whether I'm looking up YouTube videos on samples of my favorite songs, or briefly trying to sample songs myself, there will always be something magical about sampling. And as if to bring this entire video full circle, you'll never guess what I just dug up. This is an old digital music project from my sophomore year of high school, using Music Plant from Sonic Advance 2 as the sample. Believe you me, I will be the first one to admit that it sounds like complete garbage and is complete garbage. But this should go to show you just how much these two things mean to me. I have always, for so many years, wanted to combine my love for hip-hop with my passion for video games. Words can't describe how deeply both of those things have impacted me. And even if there were gaming references in rap music or songs that sample a track from a video game, there was always something missing. However, the way that the Sonic franchise uses hip-hop has made me realize that the crucial thing that was missing, the thing that I placed such an incredibly high value on, was respect. You can tell that all of the composers for each of the games I've talked about all loved hip-hop. And you can tell that all the rappers and vocalists who worked with the franchise all loved Sonic. And it's because of that mutual admiration that has allowed someone like me, who is a diehard fan of both, to experience a whole new level of joy. It brings me joy knowing that these songs are all coming from a genuine place of love and affection for the opposite thing. And it also puts into perspective just how far both of my favorite things have come, that this is even a thing that is able to happen. Throughout all the controversy and all the struggles that both have gone through, they still managed to create a fandom of people who grew up and have formative memories with both. And the fact that that happened and is a possibility is something that is 1000% worth celebrating. Above all else, that was the ultimate end goal of this entire video. Not only to celebrate my gaming and hip-hop obsession, but to also celebrate how far both have come and how much both have shaped the lives of so many people. And honestly, seeing how there aren't many videos talking about this, I think I did a pretty good job.